Welcome back to the Strategy of Everything. My name is Dave Thomas. This episode is the strategy of open fire cooking. And I very specific, I know. But I spoke to Matt Basile, who's a chef. He's a former restaurateur. He had several restaurants in Toronto, a very popular food truck called Fidel Gastro's, which actually got him a Food Network television show. So Matt went from hanging out at a party and making sandwiches for his friends to being on the Food Network with his own show within a year. So his journey and his story is unbelievable. We really talk about his unfair advantage, and there's a lot there for people to learn, and I think there's a lot of insights here. So as always, please go look for the companion episode where I'll break down Matt's strategy using the Strategy of Everything tools, and you'll be able to take some learnings away from that and hopefully apply them to your project, your business, whatever it is that you are working on. So here's my interview with Chef Matt Basile. Matt Basile, how are you, man?
Good, man. How are you?
I am great. Thanks for taking the time to connect, and I'm glad you got the wardrobe notes so we could match.
This is also the thickest my beard has ever been, too. So there you go.
Yeah, I actually shaved this morning, so this is how it pops up. So how's it going with you, man? What are you up to?
Good. Really interesting time of year for us. Like we being like our company Alchemy Grills had a really busy summer, and the weather was just so mild for us this year. It really shows like how weather can lengthen a season, and it can change like sales cycles. So it's something that's a nice little bonus. So now we're just kind of winding down the year, and it's more about strategy planning now for 2025 and what that looks like.
Yeah, awesome. So why don't we do, we're not going to go through like your entire like life history here, but I think like the story is pretty awesome. You were working at an agency that didn't work out. You loved cooking. You kind of started the folklore goes, you're at a party one night and you cooked a bunch of food. Everybody started loving it. But then you started really with like the pop-up sandwich thing, right?
Yeah.
That's what kind of like lit the fire. Cause that's when it was like Fidel Gastro's, this whole thing kind of like buzzed around Toronto, that there was this dude making sandwiches. So like in that moment, when you're at that stage, you've kind of like, I'm not a professional chef. I'm just going to try this thing out. Like, what are you expecting when you start just like popping up to sell sandwiches, and then, what happened from there?
Well, I think it's twofold, right? So the expectation is I make enough sandwiches or sell enough sandwiches to make a living, because I'd quit my job to do this. It's not like I was like doing it on the part-time or doing it on the side. I was all in. I really believed in the concept, and I thought I think my advertising and marketing brain set me up to succeed in ways that more traditional and conventional quote unquote chefs might not have seen the opportunity, whereas I only saw upside, right? Like most people would have been like, what do you mean you don't have a kitchen? And I was like, I love that I don't have a kitchen, So I think being very different, and we're talking like 14 years ago now, like that's how long ago this kind of pop-up mentality or model started. Mm-hmm. So it had to sell product, or else it was gonna be a really short-lived project, right? Because that was my income, but it also had to grow, and by grow I mean like the brand had to see momentum and growth, and that was instant. Like between, I think, in my first 2 or 3 months of business, it was like a couple articles here and there to like getting full feature segments on global news, and being invited and into doing all these different kind of big media events. And it was it really caught me by surprise in that I was implementing all the the rhetorical stuff you put in a plan, a marketing plan or an advertising plan, and you hope the best case scenario happens with your client. It was all happening. Like all the impressions, all the growth, all the reach. It was, you know, the emails of people wanting to do work together. It was wild. So it was great to, and what's really interesting is, especially in those early days, I got a lot more respect and a lot more, call it like cred, from people not in the food business, but in the advertising and PR game. The chefs in the food business, actually, I got a lot of pushback because I was like, "Who's this kid? He's got no, he didn't went up the ranks, you know." Meanwhile, I'm just doing it on my own. Like I was doing the dishes in my parents' basement. I was doing all the prep at my buddy's butcher shop, and I was giving him like free labor during the day in order to be able to cook there for free at night. And so I was putting in the time, and I think, but no one was seeing it because I was doing it on my own. And people just thought I just showed up and had a, you know, used, at the time it was actually Twitter was like the biggest tool I had, and which is so funny because I don't even touch Twitter now. But anyway, that's another story. So yeah, so then, and then it was like, okay, well now how do you make a business out of it? So it was from pop-up to food truck. That was just a very natural next step for a lot of reasons. It was a lower barrier of entry cost-wise, but it also was very much aligned with the vibe and the energy of what we were doing. So it just kind of made sense. And then from there, I had a lot of television opportunities, including my own show, which was like crazy if you think about it. Like my first year of business, I got a TV show, people just like being like, "Wow, your job is wild. We're going to follow you around." And then that journey turned into us opening up a full service restaurant. I had no restaurant experience ever at that point. So I've only ever worked in my own restaurant. Like I've had never, so it's just like opportunity after opportunity kept coming up. And I was just so young and energetic and eager that I always found a way to make these things work. I think in retrospect, 14 years later, I can look back on that time and say, I might have been doing a lot of things, but I wasn't necessarily proficient in any of them. You know, I was using the commodity of energy and my relentless work ethic. And I think that's what bought me time, was that people were like, "Oh, this guy's everywhere. Like he's working at this event one night and then this event next morning, and he's open like I was doing everything just to learn as quickly as I could in that space. And I think now, 14 years later, still an entrepreneur, but in a slightly different lens, but still within the vertical of food, still connecting with people about cooking. So they're cousins, but it's different now because it's all about developing a product for at-home use, and it's cool. It's been a pretty interesting, you know, story arc, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think like one of the patterns that like kind of comes through your story is always like you mentioned is like that opportunity. And so being able to identify like in real time a risk or an opportunity and how you navigate it is kind of, you know, pivotal to like success ultimately. And
It's
so
almost like, it's also like being just like naive too, right? Because you know the saying, like, you don't know what you don't know. Well, if you don't know anything, you're down to do anything. So it's like, but then when you've had, you know, situations not necessarily unfold the way you had hoped or planned or whatever, you take those as learning moments, right? And learning opportunities.
yeah, and so when you were in those moments, like did you have any like those opportunities start to show themselves? Was there any hesitation? And would you, you know, the way that you approached it then, which was like this youthful kind of, you know, naivety of like, I don't know, I'm just doing it.
Sure.
Would you approach it differently? Like now that you have all this experience, how would you have approached it differently? Or would you just been like, I don't know if it would have made a difference. That's probably the way I needed to do it.
I think that's the way I needed to do it at the time. And I think now I would approach it differently. I'm older. You know, I am trying to do fewer things not at 100%. So everything I do now, I try to do with 100% conviction, right? And I don't think I could ever say I was excellent at anything before. I think I was good at things and I was willing to work hard and learn from them. But like now, like in all honesty, the food I put out is the best food I've ever cooked in my life, hands down. I have mastered, or at least become proficient at cooking over live fire and showcasing a accessibility to live fire cooking that maybe might have seemed intimidating previously. Like you see these big apparatuses over fire pits or whatever. So I've tried very hard to make anyone feel like they can cook over fire and have a comfort level. But I don't think, but that took years of misguided energy. That took years of maybe doing projects I had no business doing, but just took them on because why not, right? It was Tuesday. I had projects that were incredibly successful, both, some of which are financial and some of them are just purpose driven, right? And then I had some that were absolute failures, both financial and purpose. So I think defining, what is a successful project really helps ahead of time. Ask yourself why you're going down a road and what resources will it take to see this thing through? Is it going to be a financial resource, an energy resource, a passion resource, does it require more than just one resource? Does it need a team and are you just a spoke within that? And I think, again, time helps you recognize these things. I think in the 14 years ago, I was driven to be an entrepreneur, and 14 years later, I'm still driven by that. However, the difference is then I saw every opportunity remember American Gladiators, like the end, like when you had to run that like obstacle course, like that's what I saw and even the music's in my head, like da, 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 and you're just like trying to survive. Whereas now, you've seen these scenarios play out enough times where you can take a much calmer approach. You can make a far more strategic approach, and you can still be very, invested with your hands and getting something done, but it just might require a lot less energy. Your risks are now different, right? Like before, the risk is, what if I fail? Now the risk is, what does success look like, for example?
Right. And so, like, when you're looking at alchemy, and so why don't you just like explain? I know what it is, but like explain for everybody else, like what it actually is, because it's like pretty amazing. And like, where did you come up with the idea, and like what made you go, you know what, I'm going to stop, making food for people and make something to help them make food, right? Like, how did you make that transition?
So really quickly, I am one of three co-founders of Alchemy Grills. We're a Toronto or Southern Ontario-based startup in the live fire cooking space. So we are if you had to define it, it's a barbecue smoker, but it's so much more than that. And in fact, it's the world's first of its kind in the category. So it's the world's first live fire. So live fire meaning wood and charcoal, simultaneous meaning you can do two things at the same time, grill and smoker. So that might seem like no big deal, but for the first time ever, you can smoke low and slow and grill hot and fast, all at the exact same time. And I'm kind of oversimplifying all that it does, but that's the easiest way to kind of snapshot the product itself for people. It's and
that's not like, don't like you don't have to like brush past that either, because it's like I love to cook. I cook at home all the time. Like, it's one of my like real life passions, and it's like you've got your grill and you've got your green egg, right? Like, and that's always been the way. It's like, do I do the grill or do I do the smoker? And so, like, what made you think, like, put these things together? And when you watch the videos of you cooking it's unreal, right? So, like, how did you figure, like, I'm assuming you have some partner, or did you have the idea, or like how did you guys come up with this, like the actual concept of the machine itself?
Yeah, so two ways to answer your question. So the first is like we actually try and treat it more like an outdoor appliance than just a grill or a smoker. Like that's actually the best way to wrap your head around it because of all it does. I actually can't take the credit for coming up with the product or the idea. My two other business partners, they were the ones that were like, wouldn't it be great to be able to smoke and grill at the same time? Like that's just kind of, and they were entrepreneurial as well, but in different spaces. They had started the exercise of developing the product and early stages of the brand. And they brought me on. Originally, the idea was, hey, can we, quote unquote, hire you for a couple hours of your time? We want to show you something, and you have a lot of experience in the space, and you just are the right kind of guy. And what a 2 hour discovery turned into, hey, do you want to be our third business partner? Because the product was still in early stage development. And so one thing that I got to do, I took a lot of pride doing it and it was a lot of fun doing, was being able to take my applicable knowledge and work with engineers who understand like application and help create a product that is just purely designed to have the best cooking experience possible. Because so often engineers are incredibly smart and detail oriented in the math and science behind the theory of how something should work. But then all of a sudden it's like, well, no, if you actually cooked this way, you would actually understand how that doesn't make sense because you'll have a fire or your pork will taste like fish or whatever it is. It's little things like that where you just know it because you know it. And when you merge those two worlds together, the only person who actually benefits is the end user, the consumer, because now you're getting something that is, the science and math is down packed, the thought process is full circle, and you now have something that is geared to, be the best of its class, or at least optimize things that you love. You said you have a passion for cooking. I would be shocked if you were to ask every one of our Alchemy customers, they would all tell you they all have a passion for cooking because it is not a product that is set and forget it. It requires, a little bit more of a dialed in passion, the want to do it. So it's funny when I do demos in front of stores or events or whatever, if someone sees me doing all this and they go, that's a lot of work, I go, yeah, it is. And this product probably isn't for you. And a Traeger is probably more attuned to something that they would want, where you touch a button and you have a brisket in 8 hours. Whereas if the journey and the destination have like equal weight in this, in outdoor cooking, the alchemy is something that really, intrigues you. And what's really fascinating about it too is we're not just speaking to passionate people like yourself, but it's also like we're seeing a lot of chefs want them, like golf courses and people that also cook for a living who are so used to being in the back and never get to cook on things that are fun. Now all of a sudden there's this centerpiece that can be, put out incredible tasting food, can be a showpiece, and it's a lot of fun to use. In fact, in a meeting earlier today, someone described it as like driving a muscle car. And I completely agree with that. It's something where you need to grab the wheel and get behind it. But if you own that process, you'll have a ton of fun doing it. And I think the way we've designed it, it's conducive for all these things, right? Like the fact that it's a 360-degree circular cook space allows you to cook around it versus having your back to people. So it's very entertainment focused. Because of its size and the way we've developed it, there's a great use of real estate in terms of 95% of what we've built you can cook on. So it's not like if you take the average gas grill, I won't name any products, but think about how they have the cooking area, which is in the center. Then you have like two little side areas. Usually one is a useless burner that doesn't work. The other is a table that can't hold more than a 6-pack of beer, right? So that's a lot of extra space now that's being underutilized. Then you have underneath the grill, it's either holding a propane tank or it's just where you shove a bunch of old tools that you never use, right? So you have all this wasted real estate. and you think like green egg is a great example, and I'm only saying it because you said green egg earlier. I think green egg did a great job advancing the charcoal market in a time where it was maybe stalling a bit, right? My biggest thing against green egg is it looks huge until you open it up and look at the actual cook space. And it's quite underwhelming when you see how much physical space it takes up. So I think when, here we are now as a new product, trying to be disruptive in how we market to people, trying to be disruptive in how we develop recipes and develop the product itself. We're really trying to create something that's never been seen before. And that's kind of been our strength, something that we're leaning into.
Yeah, and I think like one thing that we talk about a lot, we call it the unfair advantage, right? Everybody kind of has one or multiple, and you can apply them in different scenarios. And understanding what your unfair advantage is comes with experience, but it's also inherent, and people just do it, but they don't stop to think about it. And then when you do think about it, you're like, oh, I can apply this in these different areas. So I think when they were developing that product, how different do you think that product is if you don't come in with your unfair advantage in that situation, which is, I know how to cook, right?
Yeah, sure.
Like
you would think though that'd be an absolute must when developing a product, that you have a subject matter expert helping guide the creation of it. That's not always the case. So yeah, to your point, and then also to the unfair advantage principle, like we use our smallness to our advantage too. So for example, if I am demoing or doing something where I've got someone interested in it, but they're not 100% sold on it, I can say, hey, you know what? How about as part of it, I'll come to your house once it's delivered. I'll give you a little one-to-one walkthrough. Invite a couple friends over for dinner, and I'll do a little cook. And they're like, oh wow, like Weber or another company isn't offering that. That's great. And then for me, I'm saying it's an opportunity to showcase the product for the 3 or 4 new faces, right? So it's I do like that unfair advantage kind of principle, because you just need to. They could also be weaknesses too if you don't use them in the right way, right? Like, so
100%. Yeah, and so how we talk about it. There's kind of 4 elements of your unfair advantage. Like, what am I good at? What am I bad at? What are my unique experiences? And the where do I? What are my morals, my values, right? Like, how do those all
sure.
play together? And how do I put those into whatever situation? And sometimes it's malleable, right? Like, and so I think you can do it as a group, and you can do it as an individual to kind of reflect and figure out where you kind of lean in. Because I think, like, even in cooking, right? It's like your food, the way that you cook is very approachable, right? Like, you just cook good food, right? Where,
Thanks, man.
sometimes it's like, you watch people cook, and you're like, yeah, okay, cool, but like, I don't have tweezers to place the thing. You know what I mean? Or like,
These are my tweezers right here. These mitts, bro, right here. These are.
If anyone's not following Matt on any of the channels where you just watch him cook, like, you've put me onto some real, like, legit food staples in my life. There's 2 major ones. 2 things that you've put me onto. One is the like extra large pepperoni and green olive pizza. Like that.
It's a great move.
Game changer. And then the other one is the Big Mac sauce on the Egg McMuffin.
The sausage egg McMuffin specifically.
Yeah, sausage. See, I'm a sausage, no egg guy.
Yeah.
So I just go sausage, cheese, and the sauce. And like those 2, like, you could, like, I need to thank you, man. Like,
You're welcome. Thank you.
Like,
Thank you.
brightened my life. I gotta tell you.
The McDonald's sausage egg with Big Mac sauce, like, a lot of people reach out to me and thank me for that one. And for me, I'm just like, listen, I like sauce. I'm a big sauce guy. I always felt like breakfast sandwiches rarely have sauce on them. So I was like, let's just add Big Mac sauce. And it was a total, but it only works on the sausage. It doesn't work with the bacon. It doesn't work with the ham. It only works with the sausage.
Yeah, it's a brilliant move. So, what do you, it's the holidays season. Things are coming. Like, it's American Thanksgiving today, right? Like
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
like I love Thanksgiving, Christmas. I love cooking that dinner. I saw you do like a pork thing the other day. I don't know if it was the other day, but you posted it the other day. But like,
Mm.
what's your like, go-to holiday meal? Like whether it's a side or whatever. Like what do you like? I love cooking that, and everybody loves it.
Well, and it's funny because it's my significant other's family is the holiday, like that's where all of us come together. There's usually about at least 20 of us, if not more. I tend to get the ham because no one thinks to make the ham, and I love the ham. I think there's a lot of flavor can be added to a ham that a lot of people don't do, and ultimately, I think what's great about the holidays is like the potluck esque of it. Like, I
Mm.
like that it doesn't all fall necessarily on my shoulders or my girlfriend's also a phenomenal cook. So, we've taken it upon ourselves in the past, like especially when we had the restaurant, like we had taken it upon ourselves to like do the entire thing. And I remember one year, like we had like 80 people in the restaurant, and I had a soup course, and I was like, oh, how am I going to serve all this soup? I'm like, so I just put the big pot with a ladle out there. I said, come on up and servers. So I think having a lane is great. And so ham has been my thing. If there's like a prime rib or a tenderloin or any sort of roast, I'm tackling that too. Um, I also love duck, like doing a nice roast duck. Like I'll air dry the skin for a few days. I'll rub the skin with salt. I'll slow cook it and then pour hot oil on the skin to get that glossiness. Like I think duck is very good, and I also love turkey, but I don't cook it as much. I used to, as a kid growing up, I worked in a lot of butcher shops. I used to have to cook hundreds of turkeys every year. And then I kind of like was like, ugh, I can't do turkey anymore. And so now I love eating turkey. But if I'm on turkey duty, I'm gonna probably smoke it, or do something different with it versus just your traditional roast turkey. But I do love, 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 love roast turkey. And then the pork chop thing I did was very good. It's a take on smothered pork chops, which is a very southern dish. Typically, it's done with individual pork chops. So I did it with a copa roast, which is the copa is a piece within the pork shoulder, but it's like the money muscle is what it's referred to in barbecue. So you kind of roll that in flour, get a very well seasoned flour, get a good sear on it, so it's got this nice, and then I smoked it, and then made this onion gravy, and then braised it in the onion gravy, and served it on very creamy mashed potatoes, and it was very good. It was very, very tasty.
Yeah, and all done on the Alchemy Grill, by
All
the way.
done on the out. That's my big thing that I try and showcase with the product is showing people that the entire meal can be cooked on one unit. So it's not like you have to run inside to boil your potatoes, then come back out and check on your pork, and like I'll do it all on one unit, because I'm able to, and if I'm able to, you're able to, because it's not doesn't take special anything to boil some water with some potatoes in it. So I'm just trying to showcase. I kind of use the terminology. It's the Swiss Army knife of outdoor cooking. It has the ability to do so many different things all in one kind of efficient tool. It makes for doing a holiday meal quite easily and a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think like one thing I've noticed too, it like you were mentioning before, it can be like the centerpiece of an event, right? Have you been doing like big events where people are just like hiring you guys to come in, use the grill, cater to it, or
So
is that
yes and
just
no. So we launched a dinner series program called Flame to Table, where we actually sold tickets to these live fire dinners, and they were hosted at a few different venues. And now that we have more Alchemy Grills out there in the world in a commercial setting, we can do these dinners at different places. So I did one at Rosedale Golf Club. I did one uh, a lamb farm in Napanee. I do, some wineries. We have an event space downtown that we do work with. So we um, sell tickets to these dinners. They're 5-course dinners, and we do it for two reasons. One, to just show how we market the product differently and how we create different food. But it's also crazy because like we'll always end up selling a couple grills to at least one or two people at every dinner. And what's good is it just shows people the community aspect. the fun level aspect. And the grills, whenever we do a dinner, they're always in the middle. The energy is always around the fire. People naturally gravitate towards it. I've never in the 2 and a bit years now that I've been cooking on an Alchemy, had to be like, hey, come check this out. I've never, not once. Not
Well, no,
once.
I mean, it looks like entertain, like it looks interesting so
Humans are
people
drawn to fire pits. You know what I mean? There's something about a fire, a roaring
in
fire
food.
that people are, yeah, and then the smell too, right, of food. So I've never had to be like, hey, come see what we're up to. Like people just naturally gravitated towards it. So
Yeah.
it's a great way to really showcase the product.
And even if like in a house party, like someone's cooking in the kitchen, like it doesn't matter if the other room is all decorated to the nines. Like everyone's in the kitchen just hanging out, like talking.
Totally, right? Kitchen, look at how like, and then now we're seeing equal, if not more time and money spent on people's outdoor kitchens, right? Like,
Yeah.
so that we can spend more time, especially like in Canada where we have extreme seasonality. You're going to want to make the most of every minute you can outdoors.
Yeah. And do you find that people in climates where they can spend more time outside are using them more or purchasing them? Like I lived in Arizona for a couple of years, and some of the backyards down in Scottsdale are unbelievable. These people have huge outdoor kitchens, or it's just like a dream, right? Like it seems like the perfect spot because then the investment in like another appliance out there,
Sure.
makes sense. Where here, it's like it's already. I'm in Calgary. It's minus 16, and there's 3 feet of snow. Right?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. This year, we've put a little bit of energy into the U.S. 2025, there's a greater push for the U.S. market, just for all those things you said, like a lot of seasonality in like the Californias, Arizonas, Nevadas, Georgias, Florida, all that stuff. Where we're actually seeing the most inquired geography is Australia. We get
Yeah.
daily emails, if not multiple a day emails from someone in Australia wanting to buy an Alchemy. And I think it's for all the things we've talked about. The seasonality is great, pretty much 12 months out of the year. They already culturally spend a lot of time outdoors as well as cooking outdoors. I think it's not something you have to teach someone. The live fire concept is not new. So it's just, we like look at ourselves and be like, how do we do this? Like we're still such a small business. And right now, unfortunately, we can't make the leap to Australia make sense, but we know that there's a demand there that we're just not servicing.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you too. In and around Toronto, are there like are you still like out in the restaurant, checking out places, eating food? Like what's good these days, and what are you eating?
So I still do quite a bit of restaurant consulting as a side gig for a lot of reasons, and one of them being just to keep my finger on the pulse, and see what's going on. I think Toronto's food scene has always been one of the best, not only in the country but in the world. I've traveled everywhere, and I put our level of restaurants and just cuisine in general because it's so vast. Like there's so much available to us here. I remember being in Indonesia, and not Bali, but like I'm talking like Jakarta, Indonesia, and they were very excited to have us try nasi goreng, which is like their national dish. And it's just like I remember having it, being like I've had it in Toronto, might have been a little better. Like it was. So I just think, and that's not a hit against anywhere else in the world. I'm saying it just shows how strong and diverse our culinary scene is here. And then as far as like the restaurant scene specifically, Toronto is just like there's so many new restaurants that are always popping up. So it's hard to stay on top of all of them. But I'm a creature now that I'm getting older. I'm kind of a creature of habit. I tend to go back to like I like to have like you talk about the pepperoni green olive, for example. So it's like there's a place here called Beast Pizza. They don't even have it on the menu, but they have a button for me when I come in. And it's like, I love that shit. Like, that's stuff. Yeah, that's all, and now that I'm 40, that's all I need. I don't need to be in a I don't need to wait in a line for an hour and a half. I just want to know that there's a button for me at the bar for when I want my
Yeah,
pepperoni green olive pizza.
that's that's awesome. And I know I've got a friend
And sorry,
who
Calgary is a great food city too. By the way, I absolutely love Calgary.
it is.
Calgary, like one of my favorite spots was DOP, which is now recently closed, I believe, but they're looking to move locations, if I'm not mistaken. DOP
Yeah,
was like an awesome spot. So yeah, I loved Calgary every time I'm
yeah. There's
there.
a lot of good food here. In Toronto, obviously, I think the thing about Toronto is like the multicultural aspect of it. You just kind of get people from
Sure.
all over the world who've kind
Yeah,
of built stuff
totally.
where that's so unique. Like down in like I lived in Phoenix or in Scottsdale, so it's like we went all over California, Nevada, like traveling for kids hockey, and we're always trying to eat, around. And it's just like one note, really. Like
Sure.
there's, you know what I mean? It doesn't have those. I mean, the one thing I think Toronto doesn't have, and maybe I'm just haven't found it or never did find it, is like the authentic Mexican. It just feels like it never got the way up there. You know what I mean?
There's a few, but I wouldn't say it's definitely one of the stronger. I'd say one of the most interesting Mexican restaurants here is a place called Quetzal, which is and it's all live fires, so they have no ranges inside the restaurant. So everything is cooked over like multi-level live fire cooking. And I would say they actually just got one on Michelin. I'd say they've really hit Mexican food in a very unique way. So I think there's pockets of it, but I think it also just comes back to like you were talking about, like the cultural
It just
significance
is. It's
and
there, right?
yeah, like I'd say
And the thing
Toronto, New York, and London, like those three cities have probably figured it out because of the
Yeah, it's about the
multitude of
same thing, right? It's
cultures.
all like melting pot type cities,
Yeah,
and I think even Toronto, like the innovative stuff, like where they have, I think it's down by Liberty, where there's like all the like container restaurants. Have you been
yeah,
down there? One of my buddies
yeah.
has a place there called Sunday's Pasta Lab, and
Cool.
it's all Greek inspired because they're two Greek guys started this thing, and he used to own like cafes and stuff, and then he wanted to do this, and it's all like Greek inspired pasta, and
Hmm.
so it's like completely different. It's not Italian, you know what I mean? Where most people go
Sure.
pasta, it's gonna be Italian. There's all kinds of different flavors, lots of like fresh herbs, lemon, like all kinds of salty cheese. It's amazing.
Very
But
cool.
that space, that area down there is like that's different. Like that's not happening in all the big kind of cities, you know?
Yeah, I think it's what's interesting is it's like I'll take myself for example. Like I love food. Like I really love to eat, and it's not always like a volume thing. I really enjoy a good meal, and I enjoy cooking that meal. I enjoy eating that meal. I enjoy hosting people. I enjoy inviting. So I love the whole process of the meal, and I think that's at the core of I think a culinary city, right? Like there's a hospitality ingrained in its food culture, and I think it starts there. And then it requires like adventurous eaters, right? So it requires people to be because like it's funny because every January, February, I kind of we snowbird down to Fort Lauderdale, and I can like look at a restaurant in Fort Lauderdale and be like, I could probably guess 85% of the menu that's gonna be there. There's gonna be a broiled salmon with like a pilaf. There's gonna be like I could just hit the notes.
Did you ever go to restaurants and you're just like, man, what am I doing here? I can cook. Yeah, I can cook a better meal than this. Like, what am I doing?
You know, I never try to ever say that ever because it's not fair, I guess, because it's like I do this for a living. Where if I feel like a restaurant is um, outwardly taking advantage of people,
Hmm.
because I always factor in like, okay, well, food cost should be this, and then like if I feel like there's been a disservice in that exchange, you're now messing with the trust between patron and host, right? So that's the only thing. If a meal's not good quality wise, I rarely say anything. I'll happily tip. I'll happily say thank you. Maybe they just had an off night. Maybe it wasn't for me. Maybe the place just isn't
Yeah, I mean,
that good. But like
I'm not a professional chef, but there are times when I'm just like, I've stopped going for things because like I know the way I make it, I'm gonna like it more. Like I know I'm just gonna like it more, so I just don't go for that. You know what I mean?
yeah, I think what that does too, though, is it helps you, dine outside of your comfort zone, right?
For sure.
Because if you are going out, that's what you're going to kind of lean towards. And you're not going to go, like, I went to a very reputable live fire restaurant in Miami with my girlfriend and her father. And so these are two people I cook for all the time. And we were all like, this is a great restaurant, but it's kind of like your menu. And it's a little bit not as good as yours. So it's like, and so I think that makes sense. Like it was still very good, but it was just like, we've hit these flavor profiles so often. Like, so what else is there? So
Sure.
I think that's so important about it. And like for me, it's like, I love a good greasy spoon. I love diners. I love little, like, if someone's like, oh, you got to go try this little,
Hole in the wall,
shack on the side of the whatever, love that. If there's a multi-use space where like they're selling boots in the front and sandwiches at the back, I want one of those sandwiches. Like, so, I love sandwiches. I think sandwiches are such a perfect food. There's so much variety in a sandwich. It's your carb, it's your protein, it's cheesy, it can be warm and crusty. I love sandwiches. I'm a big sandwich guy, and it's such a great mobile food too. Like, you can walk and eat it. You could eat a good sandwich and be full for the day. I like a good sandwich.
So is that your like go-to? Like if you have a Saturday where it's not a busy day and you're like, I'm just gonna go grab some stuff and I'm gonna take my sweet time all day long and cook something. Like, what are you cooking it?
I don't know. Like, I'm a big spaghetti and meatball guy. Like, I spend a lot of time on my meatballs, like way too much time on my meatballs, but I love making meatballs. I love making meatballs and having someone eat a meatball going, that's a meatball? Like that's, I think and that takes a long time too, right? Obviously, I'll always look to fire up the Alchemy and do something low and slow there. Or I'll do like something hybrid where I'll start it in the Alchemy and then finish it in like a sauce braise or something, which is always kind of nice. But or sometimes I just don't feel like cooking at all, and I'm gonna order a sub, or I'm gonna order a pizza. I just really, what I hate more than anything is if I've eaten something where I was like, I wasted
my
those
stomach on that.
Yeah, like that just what didn't satisfy at all. So I try to really, shoot my shots when it comes to having a good meal. I really, like, if I had to do anything, like, I love going to restaurants. I love going out. I love hosting people. Yeah, I'd say, I was raised that way too. So, you were talking about the unfair advantage earlier. My unfair advantage is I was raised in an Italian Canadian family that loved to cook and loved to host people. And that is something that's innately in my DNA that I can't get it out of my DNA even if I tried. And that's how I sell. That's how I bring people, I onboard. That's how I get people to buy into the brand. I host them so well that you're left with only wanting to do business with us.
That's awesome, man. Couldn't end it on a more perfect sentiment there. So listen, man, I really appreciate it. I know you got lots of stuff to do. You got grills to sell and things to cook. So really appreciate your time today. Always good to chat. And and I'm hungry. So
amazing. Job well done then. Great awesome, to see you. And thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. Have a good one. We'll talk soon.
You as well. Cheers.
Well, that's it. That is my conversation with Chef Matt Basile. Hopefully you found it entertaining, learned a little bit. It's a great story. He's a great guy. So check out Alchemy Grills and see all the stuff they're doing. And Matt is an unbelievable follow on social media if you're a foodie at all. So you can just watch him cook and drool and do things like that. So as always, look for the companion episode. You can find it in the description below. Please please subscribe, do all those things. We need the help. And until next time, I'm Dave Thomas, and that's the strategy of everything.